Many of the players that are bursting onto the scene at the moment have done so with the aid of either fantastic coaches or an incredibly expensive academy setup. For instance, Mason Greenwood developed at one of the best youth academies in the world. Eduardo Camavinga at Rennes was given minutes in the top league of France pretty much straight out the cot. And Vinicius Jr. developed in Brazil at one of the best clubs in terms of European scouting, Flamengo. But not all stories are as glamorous as this, and Robert Lewandowski is a fine example of exactly that. Despite 1 year of his youth spent at top club Legia Warsaw, he spent the lion's share of his developing years with his two local clubs, only eventually getting experience in a first team with Gdańsk Pruszków in the third tier of Poland. But eventually word got around of his quality as he continued to score at every level he played at, eventually getting promoted into the second tier with Pruszków and then a transfer to Lech Poznan in the top level of Poland, thus earning his move to Borussia Dortmund in Germany.
Expectations were kind of limited initially because he had a couple of players ahead of him, guys like Lucas Barrios, who was kind of the star striker for Jurgen Klopp when he first arrived. In the first season he won the Bundesliga. From then on, Lewandowski kind of managed to force his way into the team and just went from strength to strength, particularly under Klopp, who of course coached him brilliantly. And from then on, it's been a steady progression.
At this time, he really was already a very, very good striker. But I think he did the next step when he came to Bayern Munich, because in Bayern Munich he had to accept that he is not only a striker, he had to be a team player. And I think this is the education of the last 2 years, perhaps, that he's getting now more stronger than ever, because he's feeling now that he's a player of Bayern Munich. He's not dreaming anymore about Real Madrid or going to Barcelona.
But despite this evident raw talent, the managers that he has played under along the way to becoming a modern footballing great have been pivotal to his development. Champions League winning Guardiola added a lot to his game, but he also learned a lot playing under some guy when he was at Dortmund, Strop or Flop or Kitchen Mop or something like that, I can't remember.
I think back when he first came to Dortmund, he certainly wasn't the finished article. I think under Klopp he became more of what we would consider a pure striker, whereby his job was to put the ball in the back of the net. He had guys like Goetze around him, Kevin Grosskreutz, guys who would put it on a plate for him and put in the hard yards too. But again, as he progressed, as he worked under, obviously Pep Guardiola, I think that's when he added the elements of link-up play to his game. He had guys around him who he could no longer just be under Guardiola a passenger in terms of pressing, in terms of hard work, in terms of creation. He had to really be more involved in that, link up with guys like Müller. And so I just think with each manager he's learned new things, particularly under Guardiola, where he learned to become more of a team player. And you see from his goal output that it's not a case of you become more of a team player and your goals are inhibited. I think you see that with Sergio Aguero in the Premier League, or Harry Kane. The fact that you can link play, the fact that you can become more rounded, doesn't mean you're going to lose that killer instinct in front of goal. I think it just means you become a better player overall. I think you see someone who grew into a leadership role as well. That was key under Guardiola, because it wasn't just a case of one player-led team. I think under Guardiola, players had a bigger degree of responsibility. And particularly the more senior figures had to take on a responsibility role. You see now, Lewandowski, Thomas Müller, these guys are real leaders in the dressing room. And I think he became that under Guardiola. He gained a greater degree of responsibility.
The season just gone for Lewandowski was another massive one in terms of solidifying himself as a Bayern legend. But for a player with 400 career goals in 600 club appearances, he's still rarely mentioned in the same breath as Messi, Ronaldo or Neymar even. I'm not trying to say that he's better than those players, or at least the former two, but despite this consistent level of performance and all the stuff that he's won with Dortmund, with Bayern, there still exists the essence that he is rather underrated, and maybe his lack of European success might be the contributor to that. Despite getting to 3 Champions League semi-finals with Bayern and 1 final with Dortmund, he's never brought the trophy home. And if he doesn't achieve that this year, this could remain the final missing piece of the puzzle for Lewandowski's career.
You know, this is the one big point Robert is waiting for. You know, he wanted to go to Bayern Munich earlier, but Dortmund didn't allow it. So he would be in this historical final in 2013 on the side of Bayern Munich. So he would have the title already. But I think this is the history of very big players, that you need such titles. You imagine Michael Ballack, which was one of the best German midfielders, but he couldn't win the title with Bayern Munich and not even with Chelsea. So Robert is very keen to win this because he knows he needs it. He's not in a national team like Germany, which every tournament has a chance to win there a big international title. So I think he's doing everything for winning this one title, the Champions League.
Lewandowski hasn't got that European pedigree to put next to the likes of Gerd Müller and Uli Hoeneß. I think it's not too late. He still could go out and win a European Cup or two, a Champions League or two. But that's really where people are going to nitpick and say, well, in the big moments, did he really deliver what he should have done? Did he make the game-winning plays that he should have done? When Guardiola was there really weren't many excuses as to why they didn't win the European Cup, because I think the squad was there. I think the manager was there. The way they played was just brilliant. I mean, at their best, they were the best team to watch in Europe. They were just stunning, you know.
The record for the most goals ever scored in a Bundesliga campaign came in the 1971-72 season, when Bayern Munich legend Gerd Müller scored a whopping 40 times. The closest any players ever come to that was actually Gerd Müller himself, when he netted 38 and 36 goals in the 1970 and 1973 season respectively. Although this season, much of the early chatter was regarding Robert Lewandowski and whether he could beat that record, as he had such an impressive start to the season with 16 goals in his first 11 games. Although we know now that he didn't achieve this, as he only scored 34 goals, there is speculation over whether he could break the record next season. Despite his own personal great start to the campaign just gone, Bayern weren't hitting on all cylinders under Niko Kovac, who was eventually sacked. Although the new manager that's come in, Hansi Flick, has had a lot of success so far domestically and in Europe. So, with Hansi Flick at the helm for presumably all of next season, could Lewandowski break the record?
We talked about this topic with Robert these days, and himself, he says it's not possible. There are many matches beside Bundesliga. In the times of Gerd Müller, there was a focus totally on Bundesliga. And he also said that the defense at this time was not so strong in every team. At this time of Gerd Müller in this season, Bayern Munich was winning with 11-1 against Dortmund. Imagine this times. I think it can't happen again. But on the other hand, he scored 34 goals and he was missing 3 matches in this season. So if he plays every match, you never know.
But even if Lewandowski doesn't beat the goal record next year or win the Champions League this season, he isn't really a player who's showing any signs of slowing down. I mean, he just broke his own personal Bundesliga goal record and is putting in every effort to keep himself as fit as possible, even though some of those methods are rather unorthodox, to say the least.
The best thing on him is that he cares on himself, because he's getting 32 now, but he has a body like a guy who's 28, and he's doing a lot for that. He's eating raw meat at breakfast, and I don't know if you know the story that he's eating his dessert at first because it's better. I think this is a little bit crazy, but if it works, it's fantastic. I wouldn't do it myself.